Hey there, guys. So I want to thank you, as always, for taking the time to join today's live stream. So, of course, before I do get started, I do want to mention that I have a offer of 30% off on online fitness coaching for a limited time. I will be sharing a post today that'll detail a little bit more about that. But you can definitely join in on that offer. Again, it's 30% off online coaching. And if you want to learn more about online coaching, you can visit my website. It's bponlinefitness.com. That's where I have a ton of information as it relates to online coaching, as well as a ton of free information that you get access to, such as a fitness blog that I post each and every week, as well as signing up for my email list. You can also check out the latest live streams that go up on my website as well. So definitely check that out. Again, it's bponlinefitness.com. I should have the actual address link for you to look at as I get to the end of this live stream for you to view and to check out and to look at the website and see if it's something that you're interested in. So, with all that being said, guys, let's go ahead and talk about today's topic, which is mobility work for lifelong fitness. Now, this is a topic that I was kind of on the fence on talking about because I know it's a topic that can feel like it's more geared towards a specific demographic of people. But this is actually not the case when we're talking about mobility. Mobility can be something beneficial for various different fitness goals, and it can be beneficial for your overall health and well-being as you age throughout life. So this topic is very relevant to everybody. So I want to go over this topic and really discuss the difference between what mobility is, as well as how this sort of relates to like when we're talking about like stretching, or maybe we're talking about warm-ups, things of that nature. So, what will be discussed in this stream, there's basically five different things we're going to go over here. So, what is mobility and why does it matter? That's the first point we're going to make. The benefits of mobility training for all ages, how mobility declines as we age, mobility versus stretching, and mobility for injury prevention. So, just keep in mind that this is very relevant to any sort of demographic of people, and even any fitness goal. Mobility is just as important for a fat loss based goal as it is for anything related to muscle gain. So just sort of keep that in mind. It's very important for the aspect of injury prevention, preventing injuries from your workouts and things of that nature. And that's what we're going to sort of go over what this means and why it matters. So, what is mobility and why does it matter? So, mobility refers to the range of motion in your joints, combined by the ability to move your muscles with control through that range of motion. It's different from flexibility, which is more passive, focusing on how far a muscle can stretch. Mobility, on the other hand, is dynamic. It's about moving through the space with strength and stability. One of the biggest reasons mobility is essential is its role in injury prevention. Poor mobility can lead to improper movement patterns, which put extra strain on your joints, ligaments, and muscles. Over time, this can lead to overuse injuries, muscle imbalances, and even acute injuries like sprains and strains. So, when we're talking about mobility and sort of just injury prevention in general, this is what I want to get across to you is that mobility is focusing on the dynamic aspect of stretching. So basically, what dynamic means is that means that there is more movement that is being done versus when we're talking about something like static stretching or anything of that sort, or like foam rolling can be considered under the same umbrella as a static stretch. However, it's somewhat known as SMR, which is self myofascial release. That's another topic in itself, but it's still considered that same sort of umbrella of static stretching. Whereas with mobility, we're talking about dynamic. And dynamic is all about movement. So, for example, anything that is like you have like dynamic stretches that may be like for like the hip flexors, or you have dynamic stretches that are helping to, prepare your body and warm up your body. That's where you're going to see where mobility takes a big, role in your routine. And not only in your routine in that specific warm up, but the workouts you do. When you incorporate these dynamic movements and you incorporate these, in a very strategic manner where whatever you're stretching that specific day, or whatever mobility workouts you're doing that specific day, it is helping to prepare you for the workouts you're specifically targeting. So you want to make sure that you're doing, for example, like we're focusing on back and biceps. You want to focus on particularly targeting the muscles of, the back and biceps when you're doing those dynamic stretches. There's various different stretches that can be, or dynamic stretches that can be considered under this, umbrella of mobility. So again, mobility is about the range of motion in your joints. It's about the movement of your joints. So keep that in mind that this is completely different than when we're talking about flexibility and talking about static stretches, which is a more passive form of sort of a more passive form of stretching, I should say. So mobility training for all ages. So what I'm going to discuss here further is going over some examples of what these sort of mobility exercises are and what they mean. So, and how these exercises can be beneficial for various different age groups. Again, like I mentioned, at the beginning, this is not a specific topic that's just geared towards one person. It can be beneficial for all ages. And it can be especially beneficial, depending on your age. So during growth, children experience rapid changes in muscle and joint structures. Mobility training helps them build stability and improve movement patterns, which can prevent future injuries and enhance athletic performance. An example of this would be body weight squats, arm circles, and hip openers. So even a younger demographic could still benefit from this type of training. Many adults face sedentary lifestyles. Again, when we're talking about sedentary, when you hear that term, that is basically a lifestyle where we are not moving as much. That can be something where we're sitting at a desk very often, or, our work is not as, we're not as mobile in our work environment. So that's what a sedentary lifestyle is. So, spending extended periods sitting or performing repetitive tasks, these habits can lead to tightness, poor posture, and restricted movement. Mobility training counters these effects, keeping the body functional and efficient. An example would be hip flexor stretches, thoracic spine rotations, and ankle mobility drills. As we age, we naturally lose muscle mass, flexibility, and joint mobility. Mobility training helps older adults maintain independence, reduce the risk of falls, and stay active without pain or discomfort. So this could be gentle seated stretches, controlled leg lifts, and shoulder rolls. So what you're seeing with a lot of these examples is they're very simple exercises, and they're more focused on, stretching a particular muscle or muscle groups. And that's the main thing with mobility training. We are basically doing the opposite of what we would do with a static stretch. We're not particularly focusing on, you know, the passive, stretching of that muscle. We're focused on the active aspect, whereas we're really focusing on activating that muscle and preparing that muscle and keeping that muscle mobile. And that's the main thing that you're noticing with these. So these are all examples of mobility training. And keep in mind that, depending on where you're at, it doesn't mean that, this specific age group just has to do this type of, mobility training. There's various different types of training that you can do, depending on where you're at in your journey, your fitness journey. Like if you're a beginner, there's different things to keep in mind when it comes to incorporating these types of mobility training exercises. But this gives you a good idea on sort of what types of exercises can be beneficial for this specific age group, whether you're, a child, whether you're a younger adult, or whether you're an older adult. So there's just a lot of different factors to keep in mind. So how mobility declines as we age. So this is something that you really need to keep in mind, no matter what your age is. I think exercise should be, geared towards everybody. I think everybody should, implement it in their life in some shape or fashion. And I know that it's not, for some people, it's not as easily accessible, and I can understand, the situation. But I think this is a topic that will, make you think a little bit more about really focusing on, putting fitness as the forefront in your life and just focusing on, you know, you don't have to, what I want to get across here is you don't have to completely uproot your life, just to integrate a fitness routine. That's not what it's about. And that's the same way with what I teach my clients is that when it comes to getting adjusted to a workout routine, fitness, or anything of that sort, you do not have to uproot your life and completely rearrange everything just to, include fitness, your nutrition. It's all about a gradual progression. So I'm not telling you, when we're talking about these things and to alarm you because of these things, like when we're talking about the difference mobility makes when we age. So don't be alarmed by this. If you want to make fitness a part of your life and you want to really start to move more in your life, do it gradually. That's how you, sustain that, sort of habit and that lifestyle over a long period of time. A lot of people just want to completely uproot their life and completely change every aspect of their life for it to align with their fitness goals at that current point. But the thing you need to focus on most is the gradual changes, gradually changing your habits to adjust to something new. And that's one of the things that I feel like a lot of people are just not aware of, and they feel like they have to completely change everything at once. That's not how it should work. So keep this in mind if you're somebody who's wanting to get, into a new routine or get into fitness itself or just exercising more just in general. Focus on changing your small habits. And again, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because of what we're talking about here. When we're talking about some of the effects that can happen, when it comes to not taking care of our mobility and our overall, exercising and or just our health in general. You can change that. Just focus on gradual, changes in your life. So I know I kind of went off there, but I just wanted to mention that because we're talking about something that can be kind of an alarm or something that could be kind of just makes you want to, okay, maybe I need to start doing this. But just what I'm trying to say is when you do start to do a routine, focus on that slow progression. That's the most important thing. But anyways, so when we're talking about mobility declining as we age, there's various different things to keep in mind. So as we age, there's a thing that is known as sarcopenia, which is muscle loss, muscle mass, and strength decrease with age, leading to reduced stability and endurance, making movement harder. Joint degeneration, wear and tear on cartilage and joints. An example of this would be osteoarthritis, reducing flexibility, range of motion, and increased stiffness. Reduced flexibility, tendons and ligaments lose elasticity over time, limiting mobility and leading to tighter movements. Balance decline, impaired coordination, and slower reflexes increase the risk of falls and hinder movement. Decreased bone density, bones become more fragile and leading to slower movements and reduced physical activity for fear of injury. So keep in mind that we can counteract these things. These things can be counteracted even though, as we age and as we get older, you know, our bodies aren't where they normally would be, like if we were younger. But keep in mind that you can counteract these things if you slowly integrate more mobility in your routine, even just a small amount. You don't have to do a drastic amount of exercise, integrate a little bit of mobility in your routine, a little bit of stretching, a little bit of, small exercises, and just get adjusted to that. These things can be counteracted. Um, and keep in mind that not everything, of course, can be prevented. Some, health situations can happen. So we can't necessarily prevent everything. But there are many factors, many preventative things, I guess I should say, that we can keep in mind to prevent these different points to happen in our lives as we age. So, mobility versus stretching. So, what is the difference between mobility and stretching? So, like I discussed a little bit earlier in this presentation, mobility and stretching are two separate things. And again, this kind of goes back to talking about more of active movement and passive movement. So, mobility refers to the range of motion around a joint and the ability to move freely and efficiently. Good mobility enhances athletic performance, prevents injury, and supports everyday movements. Stretching is a practice to improve flexibility by lengthening muscles and tendons. Stretching helps to maintain and increase mobility by reducing muscle stiffness and improve joint flexibility. So, mobility is more focused on, of course, more motion of a joint, more range of motion, improving that range of motion, and being able to move more efficiently. Stretching is just improving our overall flexibility, the ability to, lengthen our muscles and tendons, the ability to move those muscles more efficiently. And of course, be able to move those, be able to stretch those muscles. So that's what you're going to notice with these. This reducing muscle soreness is more related to stretching, whereas with mobility, more focusing on helping to improve our range of motion and the movements we perform in day-to-day life. So common areas that need mobility. So there's many common areas to keep in mind. And a lot of these areas that I'm going to touch on are some of the most common areas too that you could get injured from. And that's why it's very important to keep mobility in mind when we're targeting these specific areas of the body. So the hips are a major pivot point for many movements, especially in the lower body exercises like squats, lunges, and running. So this can be a common area that really needs some, mobility, needs some movement, needs some dynamic stretching to sort of integrate into that. Like just what I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the various different exercises for different age groups. Body weight squats can be an example of that. That can be something that you can do to help to increase the mobility of the hips. Shoulder mobility is essential for upper body strength training and daily activities like reaching overhead or pushing objects. Limited shoulder mobility can result in poor overhead movement patterns and increase risk of shoulder impingements or rotator cuff injuries. The shoulders are a very common muscle or a very common part of the body that can be injured due to various different aspects because of the nature of the shoulders and the nature of the shoulder joints. That is part of the reason why it's more susceptible. So it's easier. It is one of the easiest muscles you could, basically injure. But keep in mind to, integrate some shoulder-based, mobility exercises, some shoulder stretches, anything, like shoulder stretches, such as like when we're talking about like maybe like a lat stretch, or I know that's not necessarily shoulders, but that can be a good, sort of exercise that can help the upper body. And in turn, of course, still help. That is still part of the upper body, so it's going to help with that area. But there's various different shoulder exercises that you can try, or I should say, shoulder stretches that you can try to help to increase that mobility, and being aware of that, by what you do. One thing too that I think you need to be aware of is that it's important to pay attention to what you're doing in your exercises. If you do notice that you aren't performing those exercises as effectively, if you're not um, you're noticing any sort of imbalance, I guess would be the best term to say there, in your muscle, or when you're performing those, you're a little bit weaker on one side or anything of that sort. Just be aware of that. Focus on trying to stretch that muscle a little bit more, trying to incorporate a little bit more, dynamic stretches. Again, that's stretches that involve movement, and just keep that in mind when it comes to the shoulder. Ankles are crucial for stabilizing the body during walking, running, and any lower body movements like squatting or jumping. Limited ankle mobility, especially in dorsiflexion, which is bending the ankle upward, can affect movement mechanics and increase the risk of injury to the knees or hips. The ankle is another particular part of the body that can be injured pretty easily. Again, focusing on, incorporating those lower body, mobility type exercises, like we're talking about squats and things of that nature, include some lower body stretching. Um, there's also stretches that you could do. I know this is not necessarily related to mobility, but like when we're talking about stretches in general that could overall help, that particular muscle, you could use a foam roller. That would be a good part of the body that you could use a foam roller to do SMR or self myofascial rolling over the ankle. That could help with, really helping the not only the flexibility, but of course the mobility when you're combining that with more dynamic, sort of stretching. So keep that in mind. Again, the hips, shoulders, ankles, these are just some very common areas that may need more mobility. And they are very common areas that become injured if you're not careful. So keep that in mind. So, tools and techniques for mobility training. So, like I just discussed, or like I just mentioned, foam rollers can be a tool. Again, when we're talking about foam rollers, I usually sort of put them in the same category as like when we're talking about static stretches, because most of the time with foam rollers, we are somewhat basically elongating that muscle. But how another thing you can keep in mind is that you can use the foam roller in a different aspect where you are, actively rolling over that muscle. So it can be somewhat considered dynamic in a way. So it's kind of something that can be used in both ways. But that's why I mentioned why it could be more stability, or not, excuse me, not stability, static based stretching, because of the nature of holding a stretch with a foam roller, and that's why I mentioned that. So foam rollers are cylindrical tools used for self-myofascial release. This technique helps relieve muscle tightness, improves blood flow, and enhances tissue quality. Resistance bands is another good one. It's a versatile tool that provides added tension or assistance during mobility exercises. They help increase range of motion and activating stabilizing muscles. Resistance bands can be very beneficial for incorporating into your warm up. If you're warming up for, any sort of workout, there's pretty much any kind of resistance band workout that targets, the back, the biceps, chest, triceps. You could integrate, those resistance band exercises to prepare for your workout. They're a great warm up method, and that too is going to help your mobility as well. Lacrosse balls or massage balls are used for targeted myofascial release in smaller, hard to reach areas. They provide deeper pressure than foam rollers and are great for pinpointing specific muscle knots. That's another option there as well. So just sort of keep these in mind as different tools that you could use to help to improve your mobility as well as help flexibility at the same time, because a lot of these different methods can help with flexibility as well. So keep that in mind. So mobility myths and misconceptions. So one of the most common misconceptions is that mobility and flexibility are the same. You can be flexible but lack mobility. So keep that in mind. They're two separate things. Again, we're talking about, increasing our range of motion versus helping to reduce tightness in the muscle and things of that nature. Those are two completely different things. One thing I think that you can clearly identify the difference is, again, talking about static and dynamic. Static is more focused on stretching that muscle, more focused on increasing the flexibility of that muscle, whereas with mobility, we're focusing on range of motion, being able to efficiently move that muscle. Many people believe that holding static stretches for long periods is the best way to improve mobility. However, incorporating dynamic stretches and joint specific movements in your routine is key to improving actual mobility. So, like I mentioned, when we're talking about static stretches and dynamic, incorporate both. They're both very beneficial. However, just because you focus on one particular top doesn't mean you're going to improve your mobility. If you're focusing completely on static stretches, that don't mean you're going to completely improve your mobility. You still need to have some movement and range of motion in order to help with your overall mobility and movement patterns. So just keep that in mind that incorporating both is what I believe is the best option. Another misconception is that mobility training is only for people recovering from injury or older individuals who want to improve their range of motion. Mobility training is not just for rehabilitation or age related stiffness, it is crucial for athletic performance, injury prevention, and overall movement quality. So, again, this is for anybody with any particular goal. We're talking about a wide ranging thing. We're talking about athletic performance. We're talking about, preventing injury. That could be with anything related to, lifting weights, focusing on muscle gain. You're focusing on fat loss, anything. You still need to improve your mobility in some way to perform those exercises efficiently and the overall movement quality. So this is a wide ranging sort of topic. It's not just geared towards one specific individual or demographic. It can be beneficial for anybody, and especially anybody that's focusing on any particular goal. If you have something that you're trying to accomplish, if you're trying to lift more weight or you're trying to improve form in a certain exercise, it's the same thing. You're going to want to improve that mobility in some way. So keep that in mind that this is not just for one particular person. It can be very beneficial for various ages. Alrighty, guys. So that's all I have for you today. I hope that you found this helpful and valuable. It's a topic that I've not really touched on, and I was kind of conflicted whether, this would be, relatable to a lot of people, but I knew that at the same time, it could still be something that a lot of people could really benefit from and to be aware of this difference between talking about, mobility and flexibility and stretching, all these different terms and sort of understanding what they mean. And that's what I kind of wanted to do here is really pinpoint exactly why this is important and why it's important to, focus on increasing that range of motion and how it relates to, not only as we age, but improving the performance in the movements that we perform day to day, as well as what we do in our exercises. So it makes a difference in a lot of different aspects. So thank you guys again. My website address is here, bponlinefitness.com. Again, you can check that out for all information related to online coaching, a lot of free fitness information on there as well. And my latest live stream is usually uploaded to the homepage. This one will be uploaded there as well, where you can view it. And keep in mind too, if you do miss any live streams, they will be available on YouTube. So I'll archive them all there so you can view them as well. So definitely check that out. If you do want the link to my YouTube, feel free to let me know. But thank you guys once again for taking the time to view this live stream. Again, I hope you found it helpful and valuable. I will have another live stream next week. I do have the topic that I'm doing next week, and we're going to be talking a little bit about hypertrophy and rep ranges. So that's what I'm going to be talking about next week. We're going to focus a little bit again on the muscle gain aspect of things and talk about why rep ranges matter and whether specific rep ranges are beneficial to hypertrophy. So that's what I'm going to discuss next week. So thank you guys once again, and I will see you guys next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time for the next live stream. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it.